Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey.
I don't know why it sounds weird right now. It's probably because we're in the same room. Looking into each other's eyes, recording.
I'm really uncomfortable with this, honestly. You're like a long-distance boyfriend. I don't actually like it when you come by.
Yeah, it's been, 2.5 weeks now since we've talked and hopped on the pod, so we may be a little rusty. You know, Christmas time, we've put on a little weight. It's that kind of stuff.
Eaten more cheese than you could begin to imagine. I can't even think through all the Gouda running through my system right now.
Well, today we've got some not so lovely discussion about the Seahawks the last couple of weeks and what's been going on with them in the playoff race, which I'm sure most of you know by now, but we're still going to talk about it, talk through what happened. And then we've got some value dogs, some bowl game discussion to be had with UW and Wazoo, and we might get into just a little bit of college football playoff because it's exciting. And then we've got some discussion on college basketball and the status of those three teams, UW, Gonzaga, and Wazoo. Before we jump into maybe the smallest Kraken segment we've ever had, which is a tough record to beat, but we will definitely try. John, anything to say before we get started?
No, death knell for the Hawks. Let's get to it.
All right, here is some Coyote Picnic. All right, so we've got two games to talk about. One was a very weird win, and one was a very tough loss. And I think the first thing we have to do is talk through that Vikings loss for the Seahawks. Where do you want to start with that one?
It was tough. Season ender, obviously. We didn't necessarily know it at the time. We were still hoping that the Rams could drop one, but it turns out that is what put the dagger in the heart of this season, and it's a bummer because they played well. They played well against arguably the best team in the NFL. The Vikings are obviously super dominant. We'll have more to say about them later. But just a bummer to come up short in a game like this when this team, is looking like it could be playoff ready. That Packers loss is standing out like a sore thumb. But other than that, this team has won their last 2, 4, 5, 6 games, excluding the Packers loss. Or I'm sorry. They would have if they would have beat the Vikings. Just disappointing to come up short, so short, right there, in what was ultimately a good game.
Yeah, I think you look at this game and you're like, the Vikings are 13-2 and have been a good team all season. I think we were still a little shocked at how they were able to dice up this Seahawks defense. You and I talked about it that week, and we said, I think this Seahawks these cornerbacks and safeties can really guard these guys, defensive backs, and that just did not happen.
The rumors of Justin Jefferson's demise have been greatly exaggerated. 10 receptions, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. We got absolutely
smoked,
cooked by JJ. We're going to take that one on the chin. That one's on us. Jordan Addison did not have the breakout game we thought he might have, but it turns out when you don't double team Justin Jefferson to give a little more help to Jordan, Justin just eats you up. I guess there's a lot to talk about this game. I kind of want to start with the finish.
Okay.
Geno Smith's topsy-turvy season continues.
For sure.
After we talk about these games, I've just got some numbers, a little post-mortem for the season, kind of explaining how it was that this team got here. But 300 yards for Geno, 3 touchdowns. That's really good. The ground game was really struggling in this one. But 2 interceptions. And then obviously, so the last 2 drives for the Seahawks. The last drive, first play of the drive with a minute left, he throws a pick. Yeah. And it's like, you don't have to force that.
You've got time.
There's a minute left. You're down 3. You don't need to take it all in one bite. You can work down. And he forced it. And the game ended right there. But I think the error people are going to forget, which in my mind is almost as bad, was on the previous drive. Defense held up, forced a punt, gave the Hawks a chance to drive down and, score a field goal or a touchdown. And they got into field goal range. They were set up where a field goal, 1st and 10, where a field goal would have been like 53 yards. And Geno takes a sack. He takes a 6-yard sack. they stall out there, are not able to move the ball forward at all, and field goal kicker comes out and misses a 60-yard field goal that could have tied the game. You can't take a sack in that situation.
Throw the ball away.
Yeah, it's so brutal. So 2 huge mistakes from Geno to end that Vikings game. Credit where it's due. He was throwing the ball around, but some big mistakes. Why is it always the big mistakes with him?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was a game earlier this season that we had something similar where it was just like the team played really well. We scored a good amount of points, but Geno just had his mistakes. And I think that's the kind of thing you're going to get from Geno Smith. Like, he's not the type of guy that's going to be able to lead a team mistake-free and, carry them to victory. He just doesn't have that in him. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that this rushing offense has just not been effective the entire season. There was never a game that it felt like it turned on besides maybe the game where it was just Charbonnet and they kind of planned around that and having him be a pass catching running back. But Kenneth Walker being on and off the IR basically the entire second half of the season has really stifled this run and just made it so that other teams' defense can solely focus on our passing. And it was tough. I think Kenneth Walker going 8 carries for 31 yards is just not what you expect from that guy. And then last week, I think he was on the IR again. It's just, I guess, against the Bears last week for us. It's just been quite the weird season in terms of this offense. And I think some of that can be put on Ryan Grubb. I think it's like his first year as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. He doesn't know how these teams approach defending the rush, how we need to start opening up these gaps in the blocking scheme. But what I will say is this season Geno did unlock JSN a little bit more. DK definitely took a step back, but this was in terms of the improvements that were made this season, JSN and Ryan Grubb seemed like they really formed a good connection. I don't know if Geno will be the guy that leads this team in offensively over the next few seasons. Like, he might stick around one more year. But I don't know. Like, Geno is too mistake prone to really carry us any further than what he's done so far the last 2 years.
Yeah, and you know what? Ultimately, I kind of think that's what the situation is. I guess let's just talk some numbers for a second. Geno Smith on the season, 4,000 yards, great. 70% completion percentage. That's a career high. 17 touchdowns to 15 interceptions. That is where the issues are. And what we've just been saying over and over and over again is like, Geno, give us the positive, but can we cut back on the negative? Can you make better decisions? And maybe that's just you. Maybe that isn't how it works. Maybe he's the type of player where it's like you can't get him to throw for 250 yards a game the way that he is without him forcing some balls.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that was maybe the biggest downfall of this entire offense. 15 interceptions. That's tied for the most, I believe.
I believe he had the most in the NFL.
In the NFL. He also threw 5 interceptions in the red zone, which was also most in the NFL. The mistakes, man. The mistakes. I love this guy. I don't love
you
this
don't.
guy. You know I don't love this guy. That's such bullshit. I don't have anything against Geno. He seems like a good person. But I can't do the mistakes. So,
yeah, you're a guy that grew up with Peyton Manning as your quarterback, so.
Well, yeah, but I've been watching Anthony Richardson for the last season.
That's true.
I know what mistakes look like, but the problem is Geno's supposed to be polished. When you look at the guys leading the leagues in interceptions, it's a lot of young guys. Like Trevor Lawrence is the only other guy up there that you would call any sort of vet, and he's
5 years in.
There's a lot to figure out with that Jacksonville team. He's a little emotionally stunted. He's from like a damaged home, like we're being patient with him.
Would you take Trevor Lawrence as our quarterback next year?
Absolutely. 100%. He gives you, in my mind, everything Geno does, but I believe in his ability to dial it in a little more than Geno does.
Here's a question for you, actually. A lot of the Seahawks Twitter discourse, which is not necessarily a lot of the fan base. People have their differing opinions, but a lot of the Seahawks fans on Twitter really wanted us to trade, or maybe wanted. I'm not sure what the status is now, but they wanted Baker Mayfield. Would you rather have Baker or would you rather have Trevor Lawrence?
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because if it's Baker and Geno, it's like no, they basically did the same thing. Baker has been so good, and the thing is, Baker's just like a dog. Baker is one of my favorite players in the NFL. He's such I love him and Burrow have this same level of like unabashed, swagger and confidence that I love. Trevor's definitely a better talent, but he doesn't have a tenth of the grit Baker does. But I'm not sure this team was ready to contend for a Super Bowl anyway.
No.
And that's what you're kind of getting with Baker is like it strikes me as a shorter window. A guy like Trevor, it's like where, okay, hopefully in 4 years we can be the best team in the NFL.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're expecting him to improve if you go for him. Yeah.
Yeah. Him and JSN would be good, but he's got some good receivers down there as well. But yeah, with this team, yeah, the running game never really got going. Kenneth Walker, 500 total yards on the season. Charbonnet,
that's
500
really
as
bad.
well.
Like Kenneth Walker came into the season as one of the top-rated running backs. That I don't think we can gloss over that he only had 500 yards.
Correct, and obviously missed some games with injury, but he played in 12 games, racked up 150 carries. He only averaged 3.7 yards per carry, which for an NFL back is just not very good.
Yeah.
47 yards a game in games he played. So, yeah, that is a huge negative development. And take that and pair it with Geno's 48 sacks. I'm not really sure how much is on Ryan Grubb. This offensive line is atrocious.
Yeah, we kind of have glossed over that this entire conversation. Keep going.
They are ranked 30th out of 32 NFL teams by Pro Football Focus. They can't protect. They really can't. They're like 23rd in sack rate, which is bad but not awful. They are 31st in rush rate, which is complicated stat on their ability to open up gaps for running backs.
Yeah.
31st out of 32 teams. This offensive line is so bad. More than ever, I don't care about quarterbacks. I don't care about if we don't draft 3 offensive linemen in this draft, I'm going to lose it. It's just so clearly the biggest hole in this team.
Yeah, and I think the people are going to clamor for a quarterback if Geno's not around. And honestly, maybe even if Geno's around. Like Geno has just, like we said, Geno has been super inconsistent. And there's a world where drafting a quarterback is good, but this quarterback class is not great. And I think the Seahawks are in prime position to do what you said, draft 3 or 4 linemen and just have them like kind of refresh this team because, yeah, their offensive line has been so bad this season. And in some ways, you might say that is why Geno struggled so much in terms of interceptions and decision-making. He's been on the move way more than he wants to be. Geno is a pass-first, in-the-pocket quarterback, and I just don't think he got that opportunity. Like, the pocket collapsed around him basically once every 3 plays.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that. It's same thing in terms of the rush rate that you were talking about. It's like it's hard for Kenneth Walker to get going. The one game that we had a really great rushing attack, that was when everybody was commending our offensive line for having such a great game. And it was like, okay, these are the components to having a good offense. It's the line performing well so that you have time to do whatever it is you want to do.
And so that you can run the ball to make your offense more of a dynamic so the defense isn't just sitting back in coverage.
Yeah.
Another thing to Geno's interceptions. I've been very critical, but when the defense is sitting back on their heels ready for the pass every single play, it's a lot easier to rack up interceptions than when they're having to guess. Jalen Hurts is in a very favorable position. Defenses are having to guess every play.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a priority. I think, in my mind, the only way drafting a quarterback makes sense is if you get like a second-round guy where it's like, okay, we love the metrics, we love the size, we love the arm, he's probably a raw talent, whoever this mystery player would be.
Yeah.
And then putting him behind Geno for a year. Last year's a Geno's contract. Because what I like about this, getting a quarterback is so hard. I kind of like a bit of a 2-for-1 strategy where it's like, I don't want to re-sign Geno. He's getting older. He's not getting better. Thank you for your service. He's done a great job with this team.
I need to make sure, you keep going. I need to make sure what his contract, I can't remember because he signed the 3-year extension. I can't remember if that ends this year or next year.
Yeah, I think he has one more full year with the team.
Okay.
But if they draft like a second-round guy this year, give him a year to work under Geno, and then next season potentially also draft a quarterback, then you have 2 young guys to look at. Obviously, all that is very political, and it depends on what you see that first year from the second-round guy. But I just think that's a good way of potentially getting 2 bites at the apple because it's hard. It's really hard to find a guy. But yeah, if the first-round pick is not an offensive lineman, I'm going to throw my hands in the sky.
We don't need a receiver. We've got a solid receiving core.
It's been a glaring hole for a decade.
Yeah.
How has this problem not been solved in 10 years?
I don't know, man. And there is something you said early in the season. We had some offensive line issues in terms of injury and things of that nature. So there's going to be some rebuild there. And as I look at this, Geno's got one more year on his contract. He'll be 35 when he hits free agency. It's like you don't, and he's been wanting an extension, which, Geno, I appreciate you going for your bag. You're not going to get an extension, I think, from the Seahawks. I think they will move on from you at that point.
He'll find a place and he deserves it.
He'll be a great backup.
But that's not what the Hawks are trying to do.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, they're actually built for a little bit of prolonged success right now. Tyler Lockett's obviously wide receiver 3 on the back end of his career.
Clearly fading out.
But that's fine. You've got your 2 threats. Tyler Lockett has been good enough, and we'll, over the next couple of years, we'll get a third receiver and things will change in that way. But yeah, you really have to build this line and build for 2 years from now. That's kind of where I'm looking for this Seahawks team, because next year, unless you somehow get a very, very good raw rookie quarterback, or you decide to make a trade, get rid of Geno, and find a new starting quarterback, you're not going to compete for the Super Bowl next year. That's just not going to happen.
Correct.
So I think you got to just look at this as like a window to build the team.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there.
Which is what it's been. There's been some very positive developments. To your point, JSN and Ryan Grubb. Thank you, Ryan Grubb. Ryan Grubb's been getting a lot of flack. It's not the best situation in the NFL for an offensive guy. Mm-hmm. But I am so pleased to see him turn JSN into what we all knew that was the point of when us drafting this guy where he did. We all saw the talent at Ohio State. And it's so good to see him. He's going to eclipse 100 receptions. He's already over 1,000 yards. We now have 2,000-yard receivers, which is exciting. They're very different styles too, JSN and DK.
They fit perfectly.
I love that yin and yang. It kind of reminds me of Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown on Philadelphia. Just like the big, fast bruiser, and then the technical perfectionist.
Yeah.
So I love that. This is put in Noah Fant, and our running backs struggled, but they've been pretty good at catching balls. This is a good situation for a young quarterback to come into.
And
if we can get the offensive line figured out.
And something that I want more from just the Seahawks in general, and I think we talked about this during the preseason of this year. It was like we want more from the tight end. I like Noah Fant as a pass-catching tight end. I think that Ryan Grubb didn't utilize that enough. I think he really wanted to go for JSN and build JSN's confidence up this year, which was nice. But I think I want more variety. There was a lot of screens. And you do that because the line was awful. There's a lot of screens and a lot of kind of misdirection in terms of that. I want more of like a tight end pop after a block than I want Zach Charbonnet coming out with no blocking lineman, or like one blocking lineman. Like, I think a tight end would do much better with the way that this team is constructed, because you have the other threats that have proven themselves. You just get more space to work in there. So I whether it's Noah Fant or somebody else, I think the tight end position is somewhere that we can really touch on next year too. Agreed.
And I think Grubb obviously likes his tight ends. We saw, obviously, big fan of the tight ends.
Westover and was it Culp? I think Culp was the other guy.
God, I miss Westover. Dude is a stud. But... I agree with you. There's room for growth. Fant had 500 yards this year, which is
that's fair.
The most he's had as a Seahawk. So we're already seeing a little bit more of that. Part of that might be Geno, too, stylistically, kind of a different look for him.
Yeah.
But, I agree. I would like to see more growth there. Good tight ends, man. The Chiefs show it every game. A good tight end is an incredibly valuable asset.
All right, While we're here, let's talk about the Bears game real quick. Not a ton of offense to discuss, and I don't know where you want to start. We can maybe talk about the kicker play, because that was the real thing that happened in this one.
Battle of kickers.
I think it was a battle of just like who could mess up more. I think that was the real question. The team had 3 fumbles, the Seahawks did, and but no interceptions. But Geno just didn't really get anything going. 17 for 23, 160 yards. Really just a back and forth game of punts. There wasn't much else to be said. Nobody could get anything going, which made me feel better about the Seahawks defense, because I was a little worried. It was 6-3 for basically the entire game. God, yeah. Don't look at that second half just play by play.
0 points scored in the second half, to be clear. 6-3 at halftime, and that's all she wrote.
Yeah, just in terms of total net yardage in the second half, I think did we get to 150 between both teams? I don't think we did. 150 yards between both teams in the second half, I don't think happened, which is crazy.
That's just disgusting. This was an incredibly ugly game.
Yeah.
Defenses played well. I've been saying it all year, and I'll say it again. The Bears have a very talented defense. They are probably the best 4-12 team in the history of professional football. They've lost a lot of close games. They've lost a lot of fluky games. This team, performance-wise, obviously they've had some major offensive woes. Performance-wise, they're way closer to like they played 16 games, way closer to like an 8-8 team or a 7-9 team than they are 4-12.
Yeah.
And then a great game for the Hawks defense. They really harried Caleb Williams all game. They broke all the hate on Caleb, people were sleeping on. He was creeping towards the record for most consecutive passes without an interception. That's not for a rookie. That's for NFL quarterbacks ever.
Yeah.
And he was like 50 completions away from that record. And Tariq Woolen was able to snap the streak and grab a pick. And they just harassed him all game, put him on his butt a couple of times.
7 sacks. That was actually a really good defensive performance from our line.
Huge. Love to see it. But that does not mean this game was any funner to watch. This game was brutal. And it also, we didn't know, it didn't matter. Obviously, once again, we were waiting on that Rams game, but turns out to not have mattered anyway.
Yeah. One thing that I'm looking at right now, just looking at the Seahawks logo on ESPN, and right underneath there, it says 9-7. At the beginning of this season, we both, predicted our record, or the Seahawks record, and you were 7-10, and I was like 10-7 or 9-8, something like that. At the beginning of the season, if the Seahawks had gone 10-7, in your mind, did the Seahawks make the playoffs for you?
Yeah. Well, who could have guessed the NFC would be?
That's what I'm kind of thinking right now. Is the Packers and Vikings, like the NFC North just being the monster that it was, the Commanders taking a giant leap was such a surprise for everybody. Mm-hmm. I think we all thought that like a 10-7 Seahawks team would make the playoffs. We didn't think they would make a splash, but we thought that they could do it.
We were talking about 3 teams from this division making the playoffs.
Yeah.
I thought 2 was a lock, and it'll be 1. It's only going to be 1.
Yeah.
And it's, we're going to end up, if we beat the Rams, we will be tied for the division lead. And they have all the tiebreakers locked up, which is why it's an impossibility that we make the playoffs. But if we're 10-7, we are tied for the lead in the NFC West. So absolutely, I would have thought that would have made the playoffs. And it's just, what's frustrating about this year isn't their record. It's that they just clearly left some meat on the bone.
Yeah.
Like some of their losses are just inexcusable losses, and they have some great wins. But you look at like the Giants loss, giving up 450 yards to Drew Lock and co.
I think that was Daniel Jones at that point, but yeah.
No. Drew Lock.
Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Drew Lock just had an awesome game.
Yeah, he just had
last
the
week.
one.
Yeah.
He just had like one of the best games ever. Yeah.
Correct. Sorry. Yeah, but they did give up way too much offense to Daniel Jones and co.
Which is crazy because Daniel Jones now isn't playing for the team.
Correct. And then that's what we're talking about. Of just like, 10-7 might actually be a pretty appropriate record for this team, but they could easily be at 12-5 if just a couple things went their way. They just started the season so hot,
Yeah.
To end up at 10-7 when you started 5-0, 4-0.
I think it was 3-0, and then we lost 5 of our next 6. Like it was just like a topsy-turvy season for sure.
So frustrating.
But I agree with you. I think coming into the year, we didn't think that the Vikings were going to be as good. Sam Darnold has taken a huge step forward as a leader for that Vikings team. The Packers, I think everybody thought would be good. I think it really is the Commanders and the Vikings taking that step that we were not prepared for. But at the same time, coming into this season, if we had said 10-7 and the Seahawks didn't make the playoffs, I think expectation-wise, and I don't mean that we shouldn't be upset that the Seahawks aren't making the playoffs, but I think expectation-wise, we kind of met where everybody thought the Seahawks were going to be this year. Like whether they're 9-8, whether they're 10-7, like this is what everybody thought the Seahawks were going to do.
Sure.
And I think at that point, now we're upset that they did, like you said, that they didn't get more meat off the bone. And I think that's where the problem lies. And you can see the flaws in this team, and you can see where it can build to.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird feeling at this point in the season because like it feels like we should still be competing a little bit, with where we're at.
And it's just, and some of it too is some of the issues are very technical and very frustrating. Like, this is a team that was 5th in the NFL in penalties and I think maybe 3rd in penalty yardage. They had some big penalties against them. That's just inexcusable stuff. It's like, that is meat on the bone. This is a team that has one of the most explosive receivers in football and an offense that almost strictly passes the ball, and yet they only had 4 plays of 40 yards or more, which is 3rd to last in the NFL. They did not generate explosive plays, and those things are just frustrating. They're just very frustrating.
And like we said, that comes from not being able to establish the run, do all these other things. But that is something that you would have expected from this team. We thought DK was going to be a menace coming into this year, and it just didn't really happen in the way that we thought it would. So. Yeah,
part of the equation too, you got to tip your hat to the Rams. They have won 5 straight games.
What a season for the Rams. It's been wild.
Yeah, and ending the year on a 5-game winning streak to clinch the division. I just have to note this because it just tweaks a part of my brain that's very frustrating. After their 44-42 just absolute slugfest with the Bills, where they looked like the 2 best offenses in football.
Yep.
Since that week, the Rams have won 12-6, 19-9, and 13-9. In all 3 of those games, their defense did not allow double-digit points, and their offense did not reach 20. What is this team? Is this Rams team really supposed to be like an elite defensive unit with a mediocre offense? That can't be right. Like, their last 5 games is very confusing to me. But they've found ways to win. So I guess, credit where it's due.
I think what it comes down to is the Rams and the Seahawks are the same exact team. Like, I think that's just where it's at.
That is funny. They are very similar, aren't they?
Like, they're both, they're going to end the season 10-7 each. I think the Seahawks will win this weekend because Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford aren't playing for the Rams. But yeah, they're basically the same team. The Seahawks could barely go over 20 most of the games, especially the later it got. But when they needed to perform, when they played the Vikings, they could score 24. They could keep pace with these teams. They lost, the Lions game. They lost 29-42. That was a good game. A lot of people really enjoyed that one. Mm-hmm. This Seahawks team can take opportunities and try and keep up with teams. They kind of play to their competition, just like the Rams have done all season.
The difference is Stafford has 20 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, the Seahawks were just more mistakes this year.
Yeah, more mistakes.
All right, let's jump into really quick the Seahawks-Rams game. I kind of just gave you the breakdown. It's going to be a weird one because, like I said, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp aren't playing. And the Seahawks, I think, are favored by 6.5 points, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 6.5.
So they're expected to win.
I'm honestly a little surprised it's not more. I wonder if the Hawks might also sit some people. It's a meaningless game for them.
Yeah.
But they are going up against, who's the backup quarterback for the Rams?
No clue. No idea.
I read it earlier. I do not remember.
I'll pull it up while you're talking.
Yeah. So I'm, it's one of the, what is there to talk about?
Oh, it's Jimmy Garoppolo. Sorry.
Oh, Jimmy G. Porn star Jimmy. I love it. That's great. Well, good luck to Jimmy. That man, I bet he loves being a backup QB in LA. That's
that man's got a lot of other deals going on.
That guy went from Vegas to LA. I'm worried about this guy. How much sex is it healthy for a man to have? Like, at what point is it detrimental to your body? That's funny. But yeah, what is there to talk about? When we get into value dogs, you'll see some of the lines are so wacky. I don't know what there is to say about these weeks when some teams are starting, other teams aren't starting. Some games, both teams aren't starting players.
I feel like it feels like either the game fully matters for both teams or it doesn't at all for either team.
And that's what these games are, some of the most important, huge games of the regular season, mixed in with absolute trash fests. So, yeah, what is there to say about Rams Seahawks? I'm open to your thoughts.
I think it's going to be a game that the Seahawks try and test out Sam Howell, actually, I think a little bit. Like, it's going to be, like, Geno probably will not play the entire game. They're going to try and get him some counting stats. Maybe it might be a game where they try and, whether it's DK needs to get to 1,200 yards or something like they're just going to let the guys play, try and get to their bonuses, things of that nature. Like, I really think the Seahawks as a group would like to do that. It feels like they're a team that would try to do that. And in terms of this Rams game, or this Rams team, they are trying not to have anybody get injured. I doubt Puka. I know Cooper Kupp's not playing, but I doubt that anybody of significance will be playing for the Rams. It's probably going to be Blake Corum instead of Kyron Williams at the running back position most of the game. Yeah, it's the one thing that I am worried about is Jared Verse on the Rams defensive line just breaking through every single possession, because that's, he's a rookie. He's got fresh legs. He can go in this game, and I think that he's trying to get that defensive rookie of the year.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of guy that I feel like is going to have a big impact in this game and can cause some problems. Like Sam Howell might take 8 sacks, and I think that's just he's prone to do so, and I think it might happen.
Bro, I'm ready for the Sam Howell resurgence. Give the guy another shot. He wasn't ready. Give him a look. Give him a look. Okay, that's nice. Well, okay, are you ready? Let's talk some value dogs. That's enough moping about the Seahawks.
I think we're ready to move on. If you have questions about the Seahawks, definitely shoot us an email, slide into our Instagram DMs on Sound Up Seattle, all that good stuff.
We can do a post-mortem together. We'll talk out anything.
Yep.